All right, welcome to Studio C in beautiful West Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. This is the very first video in a series on using GameMaker Studio 2 to create 2D games. Today what we're talking about is the basic building blocks of 2D games. In this case, we're going to talk about the room and the objects and the sprites that are attached to the objects, and then the key things that go along with objects, which are the events and the actions. So what I've got here is a little game that's going to be in the video number 2 that just basically shows a simple little fish floating around the screen. So the first thing I want to talk about is the room. So the room in GameMaker often is referred to as like the level, but it can also include things like a title page room or other additional information. In this case, this room or level has a blue background, so rooms can have backgrounds. They can have background images. Those background images can be given a velocity if you want the image to say scroll across the screen to make it look like your characters are moving a little bit different. In this particular case, this room simply has a blue background, and it also has two objects, or two kinds of objects. So in this case, the objects are the key parts of the game that you give all of the power to. So I have an object for my fish. I also have a wall object. In fact, I have a wall object, but you'll notice there are many wall objects. Each wall object is a square, and there is probably about 50 squares around the outside of the room. So what happens in GameMaker is you create an object, and then you can have as many instances of the object as you'd like. So in this case, I have about 50 instances of the wall object and one instance of the fish. Now, here's the most important thing to understand. When you have an object by itself is nothing. You can't see an object unless it has a sprite. So a sprite is the image that goes with an object. In most cases, it's just, you can consider it like a costume for an actor. So the object is your actor. So I have a fish actor who happens to have this particular fish costume. The sprite is of this fish. I could change the sprite in the middle of the game if I wanted. I could have that sprite change directions if I wanted. I could have that sprite turn into an explosion when the fish is shot. I can, although I don't know why you'd be shooting fish, it's probably not the most efficient way to catch them, but you get the idea. They can change color, they can change size, they can change look, but the sprite itself is just the picture. The object is the thing that is tied to it. So I have a wall sprite and a wall object which uses that particular sprite. I have a fish sprite and a fish object which uses that particular sprite. Now, the most important thing to understand, though, are the events and the actions. So the events are things that happen to your objects. So for example, if I was to have a little person object, that person object first of all gets created. So when you first create an object or put an object in the room, that is an event. It's something that happens. Often what you do when an object is first created is you give it some starting values, and that starting value might be a direction and it might be a speed. So my fish, for example, in its create event had a move set, a movement direction set, and a speed set. And it also had a random direction. That direction, excuse me, was random. So one event is in a create event. Another event could be when you press a key and you suggest that that's going to move. So the key press is the event. Another particular event could be, oh, dang, it would have been way better. You shoot something. So what happens is you don't have a shoot event, but what you actually have is a collision event. So when a bullet object collides with a person object, you decide what's going to have happen. So an event could be a create event. An event could be a collision event. In fact, there's a long list of events that GameMaker has available to you. So here's a quick tour of them. Create. What happens when you first make the object? Destroy. What happens when that object is destroyed? Cleanup is another one we'll use a little bit later. Alarm is like a timer. What happens when an alarm ticks down? A step event is a type of event that allows you there's 30 steps per second, so it's like a thing that goes on all the time in the background. Collision events, keyboard events, mouse events, gesture events if you're doing something complicated with other types of motion tracking. Other is things like what happens when your object leaves the room. So if my object is going across my screen and it leaves the room, what do you want it to do? Well, you often want it to wrap, sometimes you want it to bounce, etc. There's lots of different things. So an event is something that triggers something in the game. So an event is something that happens to a particular object. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The events trigger actions. So actions are all the things that the object actually does. So when I say set a direction, that's an action. When I say set a speed, that's an action. If I said set gravity, that's an action. When that person loses its head, that's an event. Oh, my son's not going to be too happy with me. So the idea is that you have an event that triggers an action. And there's all kinds of actions. Here is the quick list of actions and different things that are available. And so there are like movement actions and collision actions and all kinds of things that we'll go over in due time. Okay, so here's the kind of the recap. The object is the thing itself. The event is something that happens to that object. And the action is the verb, the actual action that happens when it goes. So let's show you how it looks in GameMaker really quick, and then we'll actually get started. So I'll pause and move my screen out of the way. Okay, so here is what the GameMaker screen looks like once you're into a particular game. Don't get worried about what it looks like right now. It's a little bit complicated, but essentially I am in the room tab right now. So you can see the room as it's laid out, but I could do different things really quickly. Like I could add another instance of a fish. I could add some walls potentially in the middle that might change my game up. So you could do different things, and you could copy rooms and have several rooms that look similar and just have different functionality, or you can have all kinds of different things. And you can have a long list of objects, or you can have two like I do. Now, when you go into an object, if I double click on this fish object, actually I'll do it here, I'll go like this, go double click my fish object. What happens is you end up choosing the sprite, and we'll look at that a little bit later on. Then I have three events for this sprite. So here's a create event, a left mouse pressed event, and a wall event. I'll go over the details of those in the first video, but essentially what happens is each one of these events, so here's a left pressed, has 4 actions. And so you create an event here, and then over on this side of the window, you have the list of all the possible actions. And I've got the word variable in here because you tend to use the search box a lot. So you can see here there's probably 100 different actions in here that you can use. Maybe not 100, but you get the idea. Lots and lots of different actions. So it turns out that I have just for pressing the left button, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 actions attached to that, just to that one event. If I look at one of my collision events with the wall, I have 1, and you can't see it, but if I look at, there's also the create event as well there. So that's a little crash course on the basic building blocks. Now we're going to show you how this actually works.